We're just going to have a little chat to yourselves about oxygen and maybe some of the more recent changes with the new HSE contract and maybe how that applies to yourself. We're really going to try and encourage you. We're talking about oxygen in a very positive way, because I think many years ago there was very much a stigma around oxygen therapy, but now we all realise that oxygen is there to actually do a massive amount to help us to live our normal lives, to get out and do things that we enjoy doing, even though some of them may be quite difficult, keeping ourselves fit and well while using our oxygen. So as you can see here, just a really positive message about how oxygen can actually help. But why do we need oxygen in pulmonary fibrosis? So I suppose maybe just to explain normally, the area of the lungs where most of the gaseous exchange occurs is down around here. They're little balloons at the end of the lungs. We call them alveoli. And normally, as you can see in the little picture here, oxygen passes in and out of the alveoli to the blood capillaries that are running around there very easily. And this is how oxygen and carbon dioxide, or waste products of breathing, come into and out of the body. So with pulmonary fibrosis, sadly, part of the lining here becomes affected and it becomes quite thickened. So it can be quite scarred and it can be quite inflamed. And that in itself has a massive impact on the way oxygen transfers across. So as you can see here, the big flow of oxygen that we would have had previously is much more diminished with that scarring and extra inflammation. So hence the reason why, you know, maybe some of the symptoms that you might be experiencing can be down to this discomfort, in that you're not necessarily able to take in air as easily. So I seen this picture ages ago and it stuck with me. And it's just something like, it must be incredibly difficult to live each day when you're living with this condition, and the impact that it has. And it can be different for everybody. But some of the things that oxygen can help with, we're going to talk about in a little second. So let's talk about oxygen and how it can actually help. So why would oxygen normally be added? It would normally be added as part of your treatment plan because your oxygen levels are low, or we call that hypoxic. So usually these would be where the oxygen levels are less than 88%. So we need oxygen. All of us breathe in air from the room around us. There's 21% oxygen in that air, and we need that for all of our bodily organs. How does oxygen get to those? The pump of the body, the heart, is pumping oxygen to all our vital organs, our tissues and our cells, to do all of the day-to-day things that our body needs to do. When we are seen by the clinical team and the medical teams in the hospitals, often many of your symptoms will indicate to them that they need to do many different tests. So often you will have a very much an individualized assessment, where you will have things like different scans, blood tests, pulmonary function tests where they're testing your lungs, oximetry, walking tests. These would all be part and parcel of, I suppose, an individualized assessment, and how we might know that you would need oxygen to treat your pulmonary fibrosis. So oxygen is prescribed by your consultant. When he prescribes your oxygen, he fills out a special form. It's called a HOOF form, or a home oxygen order form. He tells us on that how much oxygen you're going to need for how many hours per day, and how exactly he would like that to be delivered. In addition to that, when oxygen is prescribed, there have been some changes recently, which mean that your consultant or medical team will run through a series of questions with you, and those will highlight really important things, I suppose, about, you know, how the HSE, if you have a medical card, are funding your equipment, and how, I suppose, they will keep you posted maybe when you need a prescription renewal. Simple things like if you move address, it's really important to let them know, like just normal sort of day-to-day things. But a big part of this agreement form includes your safety at home. So there's a lot of emphasis regarding oxygen and the things like no smoking or no vaping in and around the equipment, and it highlights fire risks, and it also would highlight many safety concerns and really very important points of interest to yourself, which we're going to talk a little bit about later, things like notifying your electricity supplier and so on. So when when your oxygen is prescribed, you're going to use that as the doctor has advised you to do so. So this prescription is very much individualized for you, and your doctor will adjust that accordingly as your situation changes. So it's really important to flag if something has changed in your situation where you feel things are not working out the way that they were, because I guess you're noticing a change in your situation, and often your clinical team will be able to help support that by just doing another holistic assessment of your needs. So the things about oxygen, the equipment needs to be turned on for it to work. Obviously, we have oxygen in the air in the room around us. We're delivering additional oxygen via some of the equipment we're going to talk about later to help boost up your oxygen levels to bring it to a normal level. If we don't do that, your heart is having to work really, really hard, and that's not a good situation for your body. So the big thing about oxygen is when we put it on, it's not instant. It doesn't just we don't just put on our cannula and immediately the oxygen is going to give us a boost. It can take a few minutes for it to build up in the body. And so I suppose what you will notice when you're using your oxygen is it will help with your symptoms. So that breathlessness that you may be experiencing, especially for activity and exercise, and also your quality of life to help you get out and about, the oxygen is really there to help. It's also there to help keep you really well so that you're in a good place if you're a suitable candidate for transplant. And it means that you're keeping well and healthy and you can do all the things that you want to do. Otherwise, your prescriber sometimes will link in with our teams in our individual companies to maybe repeat a risk assessment, or if they had any concerns or issues, or they felt you needed some additional support at home for a home visit for re-education, or you needed something else added onto your prescription, your prescriber would also contact us for things like that. So just very day-to-day things. Other things that you can do to keep well, and this is just more health promotion point of view, are if you're somebody who is or was smoking, having a look at that aspect. And there's lots of help out there in regards to people who are struggling. There's also, I suppose, the normal things that we would encourage. So eating a healthy, well-balanced diet, keeping really active. And now we were talking about this before you all came on about the importance of exercise and keeping fit. And even if you can't get out to do that, a lot of the virtual content that we have nowadays really makes that, much more accessible to everybody. Things like taking your medication, and obviously oxygen is a part of that, even though I suppose sometimes oxygen, people don't perceive it the same way they do for their medications. But in this case, it's actually, oxygen is a drug. So it's part of your medication regime, and it's something that you would take as prescribed by your doctor. Obviously, we want you to flag when something has changed, because that's a big thing for ourselves. We want you to learn more about your condition and join groups like this so you can learn more, talk to each other, and I suppose be a support for each other as well. And also, these things are really good for our mental health and our mind and our well-being. So all the things that we can normally do, and that's for everybody to take away with us today. There's lots of things that we can all do just for keeping ourselves in a good place. So what's new in regards to oxygen? Myself and Joe, we both work for oxygen providers. So I work for Air Liquide Healthcare, and Joe covers this other area. So you can see the little map here. So for the last contract that the HSE ran out throughout the country, they awarded 2 areas to one company, which is ourselves, and they awarded 1 area to Joe's company. But we, in essence, we all deliver the same contracted service to you when you're prescribed your oxygen. So this may have been a little bit bumpy along the way, because when a contract changes, there can be a bit of peaks and troughs in regards to things. So hopefully, I was going to say, you're managing your oxygen well, and we can help support you with that. When these contracts are started by the HSE, they normally last for a couple of years. So with this one, it's potentially for the next 3 to 5 years. For yourselves, there's a couple of new things that have been added on there, which we'll talk about when we get to our products. And obviously, all of the accessories and the bits and pieces that you might need, once they're ordered by your prescriber, they're something that form part and parcel of our day-to-day service to you. So one of the big things, normally we will service your equipment regularly. Also, the HSE have introduced a new thing, which will mean that every person will need to have a reassessment annually in order to have their prescription updated. So that's a really good thing. That's also an opportunity and a touch point for yourselves with your prescribers when that needs to happen. Or as I said earlier, if you have any symptoms, you can obviously do that at an earlier point. The other things that you've probably noticed from ourselves is that you will always get a follow-up call when you're started on your treatment. It's a touch point. It's just making sure everything's going okay. Have you got enough of everything? Is there anybody else that needs to be trained? Are you managing the equipment okay? We've also introduced on the contract some urgent installations or same-day stuff when required, and that's something that the clinicians would determine, and it's something that they would advise us and order for you on your behalf if it was something that they needed to have equipment in a hurry. Obviously, when travel is a big thing and holidaying with oxygen is a big topic, and I know we're going to focus on that a little bit later, but that's something that would normally happen for yourselves. So if you wanted to travel from one area to another, and it's the area where the other, where Vivisol are working, then what needs to happen is your prescriber would order your holiday oxygen for you. They would approve it in your residing area, and they would send it off to the relevant HSE and or company to get that delivered for you in your holidaying area. The other thing as well is most of our companies will provide your 24/7 support, and we have a 24-hour number that will be stickered all over your equipment that you wouldn't miss knowing how to contact us. So I guess maybe just to explain from our own perspective, even within our Liquide group, we look after a large number of patients, as you can see down the bottom there, right across the world that are using oxygen. And what happens in Ireland isn't so much different. There's little nuances, but not so much different. And that becomes something that we'll talk about later when we talk about holidaying with your oxygen. So obviously, people are interested about oxygen, the cost and best advice. So a couple of things that you might want to know about. So if you have a medical card, the HSE will normally approve your prescription for oxygen treatment. Sadly, not everybody is in the position that have a medical card. And in those cases, the equipment can be rented privately, where your prescriber would just send through an order form directly to the companies, and your oxygen would be covered and refundable under the drugs payment scheme. So I don't know if any of you use that already, but it's a scheme where if either you or anybody else in your household are spending up to €80 a month, you can reclaim your monies back. Now, there is an initial outlay, usually the first 1 to 2 months. And then once you start to get into the process of sending in your receipts of payment and reclaiming, it just makes it a very streamlined process moving forward. But you can reclaim everything that you have paid above this €80 for your oxygen equipment. It differs slightly, I think, for some of the drugs that are out there. The couple of things that we would normally suggest to yourself, because running oxygen, because many of the pieces of equipment are reliant on electricity for them to work or to charge, it's really important to register with your electricity supplier, because they will register you as a vulnerable user, which means that you will be given a priority service. And they also recommend, if you're registering as a vulnerable user, some households that we come across may have moved to a pay-as-you-go process. When we're dealing with medical equipment, that's not a good idea, because we need you to be able to have a continued supply and that you don't get cut off in any shape or form, or that there's any reason from a payment point of view that you can't fund your oxygen. So it's really important. Each of the individual suppliers will have their own way of registering for that. So just have a wee look or pick up the phone to your team and they'll be able to help. Other things that would be important are advising your home and your car insurer. And this is only if you're transporting oxygen around with you and your home. There is no additional charges incurred for this, but it just means that if something were to happen either in your home or in your transport when you're moving around with equipment, that they were aware that you were using oxygen as it's a medical need and that you were having oxygen being transported around. The other thing as well, obviously because of the additional costs, if you're running into any difficulties with that, there are a team in the community that can help support you. So this might be your public health nurse might be able to guide you in the right direction, or it's usually the community welfare team or your social worker that might be able to help support with that. I did put this little thing up at the top, which was basically just saying that the HSE are now taking into consideration the types of patients that they're starting on oxygen. They wouldn't have necessarily had visibility of that over the years, but it actually is really interesting because it means in the future, when they're auditing and making changes, that they may have better visibility of the types of patients that are using oxygen, which is obviously really important. So these are just a whole host of the products that are available. The ones up in this top corner are the ones that would normally be used in your home if you were using oxygen overnight or if you were using oxygen round the clock. So these are static concentrators is what we call them, and they require an electricity supply for them to work. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. And you would be given a large cylinder like this that's about your hip height that would normally be used in the event of an equipment breakdown or a power failure. And obviously we did introduce the topic of Storm Éowyn and all the adverse weather events that we've been having recently, just as a topic of conversation for yourselves when we have the opportunity. All of the other bits of equipment that you'll see down here and over into our liquid oxygen, these are all portable systems in some description or another, and we'll look at those a little bit more closely. Obviously, before we deliver any piece of equipment to your home, we have to assess your home for risk. So with oxygen, there's a lot of safety stuff that Joe's going to be coming on to in a moment. That will be very important for us to ensure that you're kept safe at home. And also, if you have any particular questions or you notice anything with your equipment, again, you can always pick up the phone and have a conversation with one of our team who will be able to help support you by sending out your local technician. There are some new products that have been added on to the contract this time because up until now, these were just additional product lines, but they weren't contracted services. So that includes things like liquid oxygen, which many of you may be on, and also on high flow therapy or airvo-therapy, which is sometimes used for patients who would have more issues with the drying out when they're on oxygen or for comfort measures as well, and a little bit of additional flow. So I'm going to hand over. Joe is going to cover all the safety stuff with you now. So I'll just...
Thank you, Sonia. Sonia's going to run the slides for me, so I'll be saying next slide, please. So Vivisol, as I said, as I was introduced, I'm the clinical manager in the UK, but I'm here today representing our colleagues in Ireland, who we supply, as Sonia said, the bottom region of Ireland. We do have lots of patients, same as Air Liquide, over in the UK and in Europe. So we do know what we're doing. We're new to Ireland from an oxygen point of view, but you may well have heard of us from a direct medical point of view. So we have been in Ireland a long time. Next slide, please. So I don't want to scare anybody, but what I want to do is get people to have an understanding from an oxygen point of view of having a healthy respect for oxygen. When you're started on oxygen, it's not a great thing. Patients who I've spoken to describe it as a big change in their life, and it's a big upheaval, but you do get used to it. What we want is this happy medium where you have a respect for oxygen, you're not worried about it, but you have a respect and you're safe. So that's all we want from Sonia's and my points of view. So oxygen is in the room air at 21%. You're needing more than that, either when you're exercising or when you're at rest as well. So depending on what your prescriber has given you, has ordered from us and that we deliver, that will give you instruction of how to use the equipment. The clinician will give you instruction of when to use it and for how long and things like that. So oxygen isn't flammable, but it does support combustion. It's colourless, odourless and tasteless. And oxygen enrichment can't be detected by the human senses. So oxygen enrichment means that if you're using oxygen or if you take it off, it should be turned off because it can enrich the environment around it. So if you take the oxygen off and put it on your bed, that bed linen or your clothes will become oxygen enriched. It's important from a safety point of view. Using oxygen in well ventilated areas means that the risk of building up that oxygen enrichment is less. Again, we support from a 24/7 point of view, so if there are any problems at any point in the day, you can call us. When we look at the fire triangle, this is a safety thing. So what we're doing for a fire, you need 3 sides of this fire triangle. Now, because we are increasing the bottom side with giving extra oxygen, we need to reduce the risk of a fire by decreasing the heat source or any fuels, which is why we talk about minimizing the risk, decreasing any kind of oils or greases. So not storing your oxygen with your petrol tank next to it in the garage, things like that. It's very sensible things. Keeping away from any sparks, things like that. No, you can move on. Thank you, Sonia. It's like we've done this before, isn't it? So oxygen safety. So we say never let anybody smoke or let anyone smoke near you. It will aggravate your condition, and most patients won't like that anyway. So a lot of you won't like the smell of the smoke, but this includes e-cigarettes as well. And never charge e-cigarettes in the vicinity of oxygen. This is information we give to clinicians as well, so they're understanding of all the precautions as well. Don't apply grease or oil to the equipment. Don't undertake any tinkering with the equipment. If there's a problem with it, call us. Again, when I say us, I mean Liquide or Vivisol. Depending on who your supplier is. During COVID, we used a lot of hand sanitizer, and I know they're still around there. That's fine to use, but make sure it's dry and rubbed in before you go near a patient with oxygen, or if you're using it, make sure it's really rubbed in. Trying to minimize use of hand and face creams that are oil-based. If you have a sore nose, don't put Vaseline up your nose. Put water-based gel, KY jelly or aqua gel, something like that that's available to you guys. From a safety point of view, don't leave oxygen switched on if you're not using it. If it's not being used, turn it off. It makes the cylinders last longer, it doesn't waste your electricity, and it's a safety thing. So there's 3 benefits. Making sure if you're using oxygen and it's in your home and you're going round your home and the little bit of tube is following you around attached to the concentrator, there is a maximum length we can attach, but also just be aware of not getting it trapped under doors or caught in chairs or furniture and things like that. Just being aware of where things are for yourself as a wearer, but also for family as well. Just making sure. We have lovely grandchildren come to visit, can fiddle with oxygen concentrators and cylinders and things. Try and keep that separate. We have had people turning their concentrators around so it's not inviting for little hands. Don't put things over your concentrator. It needs air around it to get so that you're able to get the oxygen from the air, because the concentrator takes the air around it in your room, concentrates it and gives you the oxygen through the little tube and the nasal cannula or the mask. Again, safety wise, keeping 10 foot or 3 meters away from any sparking objects and flames, which includes a gas hob, birthday cake candles. Again, that's what I was saying. You kind of forget it's the norm. You're used to wearing your oxygen. You forget that someone says, oh, happy birthday, and gives you a candle. Don't go near it. It's really, really important from a safety point of view. It's that split second. Mustn't be near that. If you do need to go near near a flame or go into your kitchen, again, I know people need to do that. The idea being is, in speaking with your prescriber, if you can take the oxygen off for 30 minutes, it let your clothes become normalised again, so not oxygen enriched, which is then safe for you to go near a naked flame. We say it should be used in a well ventilated room and not a confined area. By that I mean, I don't mean keep your doors and windows open all through the winter, but just having that airflow is important. And in the concentrated pipeline especially, we will put both contracts, we will put a fire break in. Now this stops if there was a fire, you can see the picture on the screen there, it will melt and stop the flow of oxygen, which will then stop the fire. So that's a safety aspect, and you'll have that definitely in your tubing for your concentrators and possibly in tubing for other oxygen. This is just examples of some of the oxygen cylinders we have. Again, the same kind of static cylinder that Sonia was talking about hip height, used as a backup. Or we have ambulatory cylinders, and we've also put a picture on there of our little trolley for the standard ambulatory cylinders, not the lightweight ones. The lightweight ones don't fit in it. Cylinders kind of all work the same. So there'll be a gauge content, see how full it is, an outlet for your oxygen to be entrained into that, so to connect it, the flow rate regulator or seculator up the top, and then the open and close dial on the side. Now, both companies I know, we both supply information on each part of the equipment that we will deliver to you. So there's this guide in all of the information that we give. So, but the really key bit is to follow that, follow the instructions in there. Make sure you're happy. The technician will go through it when they deliver. If you've got any questions, ask them. Make sure you're happy with the equipment. And if not, do ask, okay? We won't leave until you're happy. So this is kind of the ambulatory cylinder. Our ones tend to be a bit green, and although they may be white, so it just depends, but they've all kind of got the similar kind of thing. The gauge content is really, really important to understand that you're not taking out an empty cylinder. So it should be in the green. And again, going through the cylinder, how to use it, going through the process. Always, if you're not using it, turn it off. Turn it off on the flow rate selector and the open and close dial if you can, just to make sure that's the doubly sure bit. If you, when the cylinder's no longer required, you can close it. Don't close it with excess force. Wait for a few seconds to on the flow regulator, and then you can turn the on-off dial off at the side. That gets rid of the waste oxygen in the outlet. Okay, so when you come to use it again, you're not thinking, oh, I've turned it on, but you haven't turned on the open close dial. There's been some incidents around the world, and it's just really important. Just get it in your head about the process of how to use the cylinders. We put on the check there that you can put, not with nasal cannula, but with a tubing, you can run it. If you think there's an issue with your oxygen, you can submerge it in some water. And if it bubbles, it means there is oxygen coming through. But you can often feel it on your face, things like that as well. Again, we're both 24/7. If you've got any queries, then do call us. Okay. This is our information. I know Sonia put information up for Air Liquide. So this is Vivisol, also known as Direct Medical in Ireland. So we're Vivisol from an oxygen point of view. There's a free phone number for the oxygen queries. Contact us. You'll always be able to speak to somebody. There's information on our website for patients and carers. And again, our technicians can go through things with you. So I hope that's kind of given a bit of an overview on what the safety elements are. We want you to be safe, but we want you to be as active as possible.
So I was going to say, I'm just going to fly through the next few slides because I'm conscious we want to leave a lot of time for questions and answers. So I guess you might hear about us talking about continuous flow or pulsed. This is going to become a little bit more important when we look at particularly some of the traveling pieces of equipment like the portable oxygen concentrators, transportable oxygen concentrators, or if you've been advised to use your cylinders with a little conserver box to allow them to last a little bit longer. So your concentrator machines, these all deliver continuous oxygen, which means the machine takes the air from the room around you, it takes out the oxygen, gets rid of all of the nitrogen that was normally in the air. It really holds all of the oxygen until it's at a purity that will allow us to be able to use it. And it will deliver that via nasal cannula or via a mask, whichever you have been prescribed. These machines will work 24/7 once they have an electricity supply. And as we said earlier, this cylinder type will be given to you. You will normally locate this somewhere where you can easily access it at home, that in the event that you ran into a difficulty, that you've got an oxygen supply that you can easily move over to. Just other things to note would be, how would you know your prescribed rate? There's a little black ball, and on the dial on your concentrator, that little black ball will always be centered in the middle of the prescribed number for you. And Joe mentioned about little ones coming in and out of the house or people. It's important to just check that regularly when you're using your oxygen, so that you can be confident that it's at the correct prescription. And particularly if you're somebody who's able to move your oxygen levels up and down and you've been advised that by your prescriber, it's important to check. So the cylinders, we would have the same things. These are the little conserver boxes that I mentioned. There are little bags here that you'll use as well for carrying your cylinder around, and they can obviously be used as well when you're using your little trolley. Then we obviously, all of the booklets that we've given you will have the durations of all of your cylinders. So when you get any piece of equipment that needs, that has a confined capacity, or if you're using some of the other machines we're going to talk about in a moment, the portable oxygen concentrators or transportable, it's really important for you to know how long they're going to last you at your flow rate and your breath rate. So these little guides that we give you are what we call continuous flow amounts. So we know that if we turn on the cylinder, they're going to give you this amount at this flow rate, for example. However, if you use a conserver box, you may expect to get double, if not triple, the amount of time out of your cylinder. So again, you've got your little contents gauge. Sometimes people believe that these are not full. They always go up to the end of the green. They don't go any further than that because of filling regulations. All of your cylinders will carry these safety tags and batch numbers so that in the event of any incident that they can be traced and tracked. And that's just good practice. Then we have these other machines that I suppose most of the reason why they came into vogue was really because of travel, and they've changed over the years in a number of different ways, and more particularly in regards to the size, the weight, and how long they will on average last. These are devices that would be used for traveling or for going out and about once you're suitable for a conserved type system, or you're suitable for what we call pulsed delivery. So it's really important. Your clinicians will always titrate you for this type of equipment. Usually they will only be used for very small flow rates, really. So you can see these little ones over here. These are the Inogen range or the Care Freestyle range. These would be the ones that we would use for very low flows of oxygen, really 2 to 4 litres maximum. And they will have different settings depending on the model. There's lots of additional accessories like little bags, little charging units, additional batteries, trolleys, things like this to help you move around a little bit more easily. And even if sometimes we come up against a challenge, and it's happened sometimes where we come across somebody with an unusual level of need, we'll always try and find a solution. We mightn't have it in our artillery right now, but we will go off and try and find something that will help make your life a little bit easier to navigate. All of these will be supplied with little charts like this down at the bottom that will give you some indication of how long you're actually able to use your devices for at your particular settings. Just bear in mind that these are only a guide because it does depend on your respiratory rate. So if you're wondering why does it not match up, it's maybe because when you're exercising or moving around, your respiratory rate's a little bit faster. So even for this model, which is the Sequel Eclipse, so it's bigger, it's a lot heavier, this would be something that acts partly as a concentrator with a maximum flow up to 3 litres, the lowest flow 0.5 in a continuous capacity, but it also does a pulsed capacity as well, up to the equivalent of about 8 or 9 litres, depending on the patient. There's little bags for transporting it around. It is a much heavier system, but we would still have some patients that would use that quite easily. You have little desktop chargers and so on for that too. Those systems, you can charge them obviously by plugging them in. You can obviously have additional batteries, but they can also be charged in a car. And I suppose the big thing about these, normally if a piece of equipment fails, you will normally need a backup even for these, because I was going to say, sadly, any electrical device can run into difficulty, particularly for these ones, because you're moving around with them a lot more readily. They're going in and out of cars, they're up and down, different places. It's important just to make sure that you look after them and you maintain them. The other piece of equipment that's new to the contract on this occasion is liquid oxygen. So liquid oxygen is mostly used for your ambulatory needs. So you get a very large thermos flask like this that holds oxygen at a very cold temperature inside. So obviously when we use oxygen like this, there's a number of risks So the training and education for this is really important, and your clinicians will only ever select this as an opportunity for you if you've got the ability to have good dexterity and strength to be able to manage, or your family, you know, you may have family support as well. Obviously, all of the bits and pieces that we provide you will have a user guide, and our technicians will observe you filling, and will do that every time that they visit your home to ensure that everything is going okay. So this system just means the liquid oxygen is cooled down to a minus 183 degrees. It means that that big thermos flask full of oxygen holds about the equivalent of up to nearly 40 cylinders. So you can imagine it's a system that doesn't take up a lot of space, but it also can be easily managed by a person that's got a higher requirement for oxygen to fill it up and go as they need to. So this is not like your cylinders where you get them, they've got a capacity and you just use them and then they'll be empty. With this particular system, when you fill it, you need to fill it and let it rest for about 30 minutes and then go. Because what happens with liquid oxygen is it ventilates and evaporates off into the air in the room around you. Where you store this at home and your location for liquid oxygen, it's really important. And there are really strict instructions regarding where this is sited in your home and the type of access in and out of your home, because these are quite big and bulky pieces of equipment. And when we deliver them to your home, they really should not be moved. There's something that's intended to be static where our technician will have advised you on the most safe place in your home environment. And that's for your safety and everybody else around you. But there's a massive benefit to using these types of systems. They can be delivered in both a continuous and a pulse mode, and it can offer a lot of flexibility. There's lots of different consumables that we can get. Both companies will have access to various types of cannula, various masks, humidification options where needed, little protective pads for your ears or softer cannula for your ears, little swivels and stuff, and additional fire breaks that Joe had mentioned earlier. And these are the things that you will be able to access from ourselves. So if you're ever running short, our technicians will normally give you a fair number of these when they set you up on treatment. But if you do need anything down the line, please don't hesitate to contact us, because our team are always happy to help. In regards to weather, you've all obviously encountered the most recent storm events, and this has been a real eye-opener. So even though we cover this with you when we install your equipment, so simple things like, are you making sure you're registered with your electricity supplier? Do you have a torch somewhere beside you, particularly at nighttime? Because during the day, we react in a different way to how we would at nighttime. Where's your backup cylinder? Is it located somewhere that you can easily access it? Is it in your home? Is it somewhere close to you that you can move over to it? Had you used it before and you didn't get it refilled, or, you know, ask us to replenish it? So if you ever have to use that for a power cut situation, it's really important to reorder. Obviously, it's important to have a think about what would you do in your home circumstance in the event of a power cut. Maybe have a little written plan for yourself, discuss it with your family, your neighbours or your friends, that you'll have somebody that might check in on you if there was anything going on, that, you know, that they might just be able to check in, see if there's anything they can do to help. Big thing is keep calm. You'll use less oxygen at rest. If you're up and you're moving around, you're going to use up a lot of your oxygen. You can move safely to another location that's got power as well. That might be an option. Always making sure that your equipment, particularly if you're using any of the battery operated ones, that you've got them charged and that you've got spare batteries, but they will only last an amount of time as well. Are your cylinders full? So segregate your full from empty. That's really important, because in a hurry, if you pick up something and it's empty, that's not going to be any good to you when you need your oxygen. So in your homes, our technicians would always try and discuss that with you, and about where you would, you know, safely locate your spares. Do you know how long your cylinder will last? These little guides will really help. And then I suppose the other ones down here are more about contacting. Can you contact anybody? Does your mobile or your landline work? Who to contact, and about how to contact emergency services. And I guess the big one is having somebody that you can touch base with. Traveling with oxygen, this is something that we always get asked about. So obviously it's really important. We want people to live their life to the fullest. And for the most part, these little machines that we looked at earlier, these all came into vogue to allow and facilitate people traveling with their oxygen. Sadly, there are a certain group of patients that won't be able to travel with their oxygen purely because of the requirement for their oxygen flow rate. So higher flow rates, it makes that a little bit more difficult to travel outside of the country. Obviously, there are options to travel around the country, which is something that either ourselves at Air Liquide or I'm sure Joe at Vivisol will be able to happily help with in our individual areas. Before holidays, really important to talk to your consultant first. Research your travel and location. Know where you're going to be going. Are there services available to you? Other ones down here are like things like your health and insurance, your health insurance, and making sure you've got travel insurance and all of these types of things. There's a very big long list there. I suppose ultimately the biggest thing that's on that list is really planning. Talking to your consultant if you're traveling outside of the country, maybe having sometimes the teams will do altitude testing, because on land the amount of oxygen is very different to what it's like in air. And even though you may use a certain amount of oxygen now in air, because the amount of oxygen is naturally lower, like down as low as 15%, you may often need a slightly higher requirement. There is a little bit of advice coming just in regards to some of the airlines and stuff like that. If you are bringing additional bits of equipment with you, most of the guidance would always say to you, plan for up to 50% more battery life than what you had intended for. So some of the airlines are quite restrictive because they will have a maximum flow rate that they can help deliver for you if you decided to order oxygen from them. But as you can see there, there's a very long list of additional things. It's really about planning with your consultant, with your airline or your travel company. And there's lots of other types of holidays that you can plan to do. And or, as I said, the opportunity maybe to travel easily to locations that are close to you. And there's loads of little guides from the various organizations. I've put a few links at the end. All of the airlines will have individual amounts on their website. So just go to their section on traveling with oxygen. And they will also have support structures in place for you in the airport to help navigate you arriving and getting to where you need to go, because obviously we all know there's a lot of walking and stuff involved around these very large airports. Joe mentioned our colleagues in the UK, so it very much the same for ourselves. Where we can help you and Air Liquide support that region, we would gladly try and help navigate or discuss that with the teams. Outside of Ireland, I suppose the biggest problem that we have is that even though we may have supplied equipment to you here, we sadly can't get to you if you're traveling outside of the country and you run into a difficulty. And that is a big challenge. So having your plans for when you travel abroad is really important, and knowing what to do if you run into difficulty. Simple ones on this are about, if you're traveling within Europe, having your European health insurance card up to date, making sure you've got all the relevant paperwork with you. And a very handy one is actually just even contacting the Irish Embassy for the country that you're traveling to, because that will often help just give you a little bit of guidance, because there are people out there using oxygen in every single country around the world. We're not anyway unique here in this country. And I know we've gladly helped people when they've come over here for conferences and stuff. So things can happen, but usually for much lower flow rates. But very important to talk to your consultant, because they will be the person to give you the best guidance. There's tons of information available. Sadly, Air Liquide ourselves, we don't supply a holiday service within our organisation, as in we don't organise holiday oxygen for you once you travel outside of the country. But there are lots of companies who specialise in that, and there's lots of really useful guidance online as well that you'll be able to have a little look at. So I'm going to say thank you very much for listening to myself and Joe.